It began not with an army or an empire, but with a whisper, the sound of sails catching the wind across the Atlantic, carrying with them the fragile dreams of 13 scattered colonies. No one watching those small settlements of farmers, fishermen, and traders in the 1600s could have imagined that they would one day command the power to shape the destiny of the planet. The story of how the 13 colonies became a global empire is not merely a tale of politics and power. It is the story of human ambition unleashed, of a people who turned rebellion into revolution and revolution into dominance. It is the story of how a struggling collection of outposts on the edge of a vast wilderness transformed into the most influential nation the world has ever known, through conflict, innovation, vision, and belief. The world never expected it. Even the colonists themselves didn't know that by fighting for their own freedom, they were forging a nation that would one day define what freedom meant for billions. When the first English settlers landed at Jamestown in 1607, their world was raw and unforgiving. Disease, hunger, and native conflict almost erased them from history before they began. But from failure came adaptation, and from adaptation survival. Across the next century, the colonies grew, 13 distinct societies united by language, but divided by geography, religion, and purpose. Massachusetts dreamed through Puritan prayers. Virginia thrived on tobacco and slavery. Pennsylvania welcomed thinkers and dreamers. New York traded across oceans. They were diverse and divided, but they shared one invisible thread: the idea that they could build something new, untouched by the rigid hierarchies of Europe. Yet for all their independence, the colonies remained tethered to Britain. Their laws dictated, their goods taxed, their voices ignored. And when that balance snapped in 1775, the world changed forever. The American Revolution was never just a war of muskets and cannons. It was a war of ideas, the idea that ordinary people could govern themselves, that power could belong not to kings but to citizens. The 13 colonies, outgunned and outnumbered, faced the mightiest empire on earth. Yet through determination, leadership, and an unyielding belief in liberty, they achieved the impossible. Washington's army, ragged and starving, outlasted British might not through strength, but through endurance. When victory came in 1783, it didn't just create a new nation, it created a symbol. The United States of America was born, and with it, the promise of democracy itself. But the founders knew this fragile experiment could collapse as quickly as it began. They built not an empire of conquest, but one of ideas, yet in time those very ideas would fuel expansion beyond imagination. The early republic was fragile, its unity tested by internal conflict and external threats. But its hunger to grow was insatiable. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803, a single stroke of Jefferson's pen, doubled the nation's size overnight. That purchase wasn't just land, it was potential. It stretched the dream of America from the Atlantic to the unknown western horizon. Then came the Lewis and Clark expedition, exploring lands no European had mapped, claiming them in the name of a nation barely 30 years old. This was not conquest in the European sense, it was destiny, or so Americans believed. The phrase, manifest destiny, would later justify their march across the continent, often at a devastating cost to the indigenous nations who had lived there for centuries. Yet this expansion laid the foundations for something larger, a continental power that would one day become a global one. Through the 1800s, the United States was both builder and breaker, constructing the world's longest railroads, inventing the telegraph and connecting oceans with steel and steam. But progress carried contradictions. The very nation that declared all men equal was divided by slavery. The Civil War, fought from 1861 to 1865, was the ultimate test of the American experiment. It tore the country in two, one fighting to preserve the Union, the other to preserve an economy built on human bondage. When the smoke cleared and Lincoln's words, "A new birth of freedom," echoed across battlefields, America was reborn, bloodied but unbroken. That war did more than end slavery. It proved that the Union would endure, that this collection of states could survive its greatest moral crisis and emerge stronger. From those ashes, the Industrial Revolution in America accelerated. Cities exploded, machines roared, and wealth flowed like never before. By the late 19th century, the United States was no longer a fledgling republic. It was an industrial powerhouse. Steel from Pittsburgh built the world's skylines. Oil from Pennsylvania fueled global engines and new inventions. The light bulb, the telephone, The automobile redefined human life. Immigrants from every corner of the earth poured through Ellis Island, chasing the American dream. They built railroads, factories, and futures, transforming the nation into a mosaic of cultures and ideas. But with power came ambition, and with ambition, empire. The Spanish-American War of 1898 marked America's first true step onto the world stage as an imperial power. In less than a year, the United States defeated Spain and claimed territories stretching from the Caribbean to the Pacific, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines. The 13 colonies had not only filled a continent. They had extended their reach across oceans. The 20th century solidified America's transformation. When Europe descended into World War I, the United States initially stayed neutral, wary of Old World conflicts. But by 1917 it joined the fight, and its entry tipped the scales. When the war ended, the world looked to America not as a colony, but as a leader. Yet even then, isolationism lingered. It would take another global catastrophe, World War II, to fully awaken the sleeping giant. The attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 ignited an industrial and military surge, unlike anything history had seen. Within 4 years, America built thousands of planes, ships, and tanks, and, through the Manhattan Project, unleashed the atomic age. When the dust settled in 1945, two powers remained, the United States and the Soviet Union. The 13 colonies, born in rebellion against monarchy, now led half the world in a new kind of empire. Not one of conquest, but of influence. The Cold War turned the U.S. into the center of a vast global network. Military bases across continents, alliances like NATO, and an economy that dominated every major industry. Yet what made America's empire unique wasn't occupation, it was persuasion. Through Hollywood, music, technology, and trade, the culture of the United States spread faster than any army could march. Jeans, jazz, and Coca-Cola became as powerful as bullets and bombs. The space race of the 1960s, culminating in the moon landing, symbolized not only technological dominance but ideological victory. When Armstrong took that one small step, it was the final proof that the 13 colonies' descendants had conquered not only the earth but the heavens. And yet, every empire carries its burden. The Vietnam War, the civil rights struggle, the assassinations of Kennedy and King, each reminded America that greatness carries shadows. Power tests principles, and influence demands introspection. Through victory and violence, innovation and injustice, the United States continued to evolve, not always gracefully, but always forward. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, America stood unchallenged as the world's lone superpower. The dream that began with ragged militias fighting in the forests of 1776 had reached its zenith. The U.S. shaped global finance through the dollar, global politics through diplomacy, and global culture through screens and satellites. But empire, in any form, is fragile. The 21st century tested America in new ways, through terrorism, financial crises, pandemics, and polarization. September 11th reminded the world that even empires can bleed. The wars that followed reshaped the map but also raised questions about power and purpose. Yet through it all, the United States adapted. Its strength has never been in permanence but in reinvention. From colonial rebellion to continental conquest, from industrial revolution to digital dominance, the journey of the 13 colonies is not a tale of luck. It is a testament to endurance, innovation, and belief. Today, the legacy of those first settlers lives on, not in the shadow of monarchy or conquest, but in the endless pursuit of possibility. America's empire is not one ruled by kings or armies, but by influence, cultural, economic, and technological. Its real power lies not in the number of its weapons, but in the power of its ideas, democracy, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness, ideas that continue to inspire, challenge, and sometimes divide the world. From the wooden ships of Jamestown to the rockets of SpaceX from ink on parchment in 1776, to algorithms shaping the 21st century, the story of America is proof that history's greatest revolutions often begin quietly, with a handful of dreamers daring to believe they can build something that lasts forever. And so, the journey of the 13 colonies is not merely America's story, it is humanity's. A story of struggle, ambition, and the eternal question of how power should serve people, not rule them. The colonies became a republic, the republic became a power, the power became an empire. But the true empire of the United States was never about land, it was about legacy. A legacy still being written today. One innovation, one challenge, one dream at a time.